Okay, well, I am Melissa Washburn. I live in Orem, so I frequently shop the Orem store. It's fun to be here in the Heber store with each of you. My family and I have been on the g.a.p.s diet for 2 years, and it has been an experience, a wonderful one at that. There's been ups and downs for sure, but I think that being on the diet gives you a bit to say about it when you've actually done it, experienced it, lived it, and experienced the healing. I thought an interesting thing that's been happening over the past several months is, you get in conversations with like-minded people that care a lot about their health, and you share your stories about what got you interested and what it is that you're trying to achieve in health. And I've been noticing in the last several months that our story is changing within our family. It used to be kind of this really stressful story about our health, some of our health problems and digestive issues that we were having, but everything's changing for us. It's not, the stress isn't at the forefront of our mind, and I realized it's because we have experienced a lot of healing, so that we can just enjoy life more and kind of get past those really, really stressful times, and I attribute a lot of that to g.a.p.s. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Your question may be, is this just another diet? I'm sure if many of you in here have been on the journey of health, you've probably experienced many diets, looked into many diets, experimented with many diets. So the question is this just another diet? Is this just another health fad that will come and go over time? And I'm just here to tell you that g.a.p.s for us has brought a lot of healing. g.a.p.s for us has brought health. And I hope g.a.p.s for you will bring hope. I know when I found the book, similar to what Anne was experiencing, I felt like I wished I had gotten that information several years prior, because it felt like the most complete book that I had read about digestive health, about health in general, really. And to tell you kind of where I started, my mom, several years ago, was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's at age 46. And this was not an unhealthy woman. She was fit. She cared a lot about her health. She passed that passion on to me. She was the director of a cardiac rehab department, spent a lot of time discussing diet and lifestyle changes with people. So this was a shock to us when, at 46 years old, the prime of her life, she developed this disease. She lived for 6 years with the disease and passed away at age 52. Needless to say, this spurred an intensive search for me and my family as to what was going on and why, and could we prevent this, and it was just a really, really intensive search. And interestingly, over time, we found there were so many similarities, so many crossovers. If you were reading about Alzheimer's, you were reading about autism. If you were reading about Alzheimer's, you were reading about diabetes. If you were reading, there was just, if you were reading about autism, you were reading about allergies. It was just like the crossovers were everywhere, but there was just no source that actually brought them all together and taught you what is it that these conditions have in common. Anyway, that being said, I just want to say that that was kind of the catalyst of our search for help. And I've also learned along the way, this is not the focus of the class tonight, but I just want you to know that diet alone is not 100% of the healing picture. And I've learned this through intensive experience, that healing involves your emotions, it involves your spirit, it involves all of you. I love acronyms, and so I came up with a few acronyms for the word HEAL. H, hunger no more, nourish yourself physically, emotionally, and spiritually. E, eliminate toxins, both emotional and physical, that keep you stuck, and the negative chatter in your mind, and exercise. Adopt your life, the life you want, attitude and gratitude, allow for rest, rejuvenation, and sleep, and let love be your motive, love of God, of self, of family, of health, of life, of opportunities, work on loving relationships, and love your work. So that is just like a really condensed in a bottle, like why I feel passionate about health. We go through this intensive research with my mom, and we're trying to figure out what's going on. In the meantime, I have both of my children during this time period that she's ill, and my son, who was born second, was born basically with colitis. And oh, had I known about g.a.p.s, I would have saved myself a very, very long journey, but I didn't. So I'm grateful that I know about it now. But that is probably really what ultimately led me to g.a.p.s. I first found out about the specific carbohydrate diet, and then in researching that more was led to g.a.p.s. g.a.p.s was created by Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride, and I see some of you brought your books tonight. Some of you have been reading it. Yeah, that's great. So some of you are familiar with the story. She was a neurologist and a neurosurgeon, practiced for 7 years, nearly a decade, and started her family, moved to the UK. She was in Russia. Moves to the UK, has a son. When he's 3 years old, he's diagnosed with severe autism. So you would think a neurologist could find some answers, right? Well, unfortunately, she couldn't find any answers in her field. So she started a second postgraduate degree in human nutrition so that she could get answers for her son. Subsequently ended up creating the g.a.p.s diet, healed her son, and has devoted her life's practice to teaching people how to heal their health conditions. She's absolutely incredible. I don't think, it's like you said, Anne, I don't think there could be a more credible source out there than a mother with passion and love searching for her son, and someone as educated as she is too. So who needs g.a.p.s? On Natasha Campbell McBride's website, she lists several conditions that she personally has had experience treating with the g.a.p.s diet. So when you read this list, do any of you relate to any of these symptoms or conditions that you might see here? I know when I read through this list, I thought, well, the whole world needs g.a.p.s if it treats all of these things. So hopefully you will find some answers for whatever it is you're searching for, whether it's for yourself or for a family member. Let me just tell you a little bit about how g.a.p.s came to be. In the Gut and Psychology Syndrome book, there's this diagram that you see here of several different diagnostic boxes, as she calls them, and that modern medicine gives each of our health conditions its own diagnostic box and its own treatment protocol, but rarely do we fit in to one diagnostic box. There's typically, if you have one, you have something else. If you have allergies, there's typically eczema that goes with it. If you have autism, there's typically some stomach issues going along with it. There's rarely, like I know, and I mean diabetes, there's so many crossovers in so many of these diseases, but unfortunately you get put in a diagnostic box and there's one treatment for that. So what Dr. McBride decided is that we needed a name for the underlying condition underneath all of these diseases, and she came up with gut and psychology syndrome. And if you can read into the meaning of the title, that's a gut-brain connection. There's a connection between your gut and your brain. She says that the name g.a.p. is appropriate because typically people suffering from many of these things fall into the gap of medical knowledge. And I know that was the case with my son. We searched and searched and searched. I can't even tell you how many doctors we went to saying, why on earth is my 3-week-old son having blood in his stool constantly? And there were no answers. I mean, we literally were all over the map. Alternative doctors, conventional doctors, we were all over, and there was simply not a solid answer. Anyway, so what do all of these things have in common? It is the state of your digestive system. These conditions originate in the gut, and they manifest themselves as a combination of symptoms and diseases. An interesting quote from Dr. McBride is that a child, and subsequently that would be all of us too because we were once children, a child's digestive system holds the key to the child's mental development. That's a pretty big statement, and a pretty big emphasis on the importance of digestion. There was a French physicist in 1807, so 200 years ago, that said the primary seat of insanity generally is in the region of the stomach and intestines. 200 years ago, they knew that. Okay, so characteristics of g.a.p.s. If it's in babies, it typically starts around 3 weeks old. And do any of you know where the gut flora, a baby's gut flora comes from? Baby's beneficial bacteria in their intestines? From their mom. When they're delivered, they swallow the bacteria in the vaginal canal, and that becomes their gut flora. And interestingly, Natasha Campbell McBride, Dr. McBride says that it takes about 20 days for that bacteria to populate their system. Well, my son started having blood in his stool at 21 days exactly. I wish so badly I would have known this then, but I didn't. And now I look back and think, that's amazing. That is an amazing detail that nobody knew. But she did, and I'm so grateful she's sharing this. Anyway, so it often starts in babies around 3 weeks old, and this is typically when colic starts. So it's an interesting connection to make. Or it happens at the time of weaning, when they're weaned off of breast milk and no longer have that nourishing protection from the breast milk, and they begin to eat what? Grains. Foods that an already upset digestive system begins to eat foods that are challenging to digest. And we'll get into that in a bit. Or it can often become a problem around 2 years old, which there's many theories on that, but part of it is that, personality-wise, emotionally, they're becoming more territorial and individual about what they eat, and they crave typically sweets and starches, and that's sometimes all they'll eat. Or it can sometimes be connected to vaccinations. Just interesting to note. When adults develop g.a.p.s, or gut and psychology syndrome, if you have no prior history of childhood digestive disorders, which I think if we look back, we can probably find a connection. I mean, I know I can look back and look at the many years I spent on antibiotics before my tonsils got taken out, the typical story. But if you had no history of digestive problems but developed them as an adult, it can be because of high stress, antibiotics, it can be birth control pills, other drugs that really damage your gut flora. It can be poor diet. So there's many contributing factors here. But typically, children or even adults can be fussy eaters, or they eat a very limited diet because they get sick if they eat too many foods. So limited diet's a characteristic, abnormal stools, very weak immune system, sick a lot. I know that was my family before we were on g.a.p.s. Despite what we did with our healthy lifestyle, we were sick all the time. Tummy aches, nausea, reflux, heartburn, and they're often anemic, vitamin and mineral deficient. So is anyone relating to any of these things? Okay, so what's going on here? Dr. McBride's book is an excellent course in understanding digestion. I am going to try to condense it the best I can. Our bodies consist of 10 trillion cells. You've probably heard that number before. But what we have 10 times more of, so 100 trillion at least, are micro creatures that live in our gut, called our microbial flora. So this is bacteria basically that lives throughout our body, but the highest concentration of it is in our gut. We can't live without it. So in a healthy body, this world of microbes that live in your gut do a very efficient job of detoxifying and getting rid of harmful things in your body. They're very stable and very adaptable. You can handle a certain amount of stress, and they take care of it for you. Whether it's, an actual toxin, an actual stress, whatever it might be.